Hello and welcome to another one of these roleplay tutorial videos. Everyone seemed to really enjoy the last video and felt that it was really informative, and so I felt as though I should just totally make this a series and try and explain a few things as far as RedM is concerned. I know some of these ideas can cross over into other forms of roleplay, but of course this series is going to focus most specifically on RedM things. This video will be focusing on terminology that you'll probably hear or phrases that are commonly used in RedM. And I'm very excited to share these with you because they're really fun and creative, and they really challenge you to kind of get into the role play of it, but in such a way where you can explain things to people so they can actually, play the game. So there's a lot of terminology that you use in RedM, and so if you don't really have anyone to explain it to you, you might feel a little overwhelmed. You might not know how to explain something or even how to ask questions properly. Like, how do you ask how to do something, how to get onto a horse without breaking character, and asking, like, what button do I press, right? It can be really overwhelming, especially if you're new to RedM. So I'm here to help you, and I will talk you through some of the most common terminology or phrases that you can use and get to know. And of course, if you want to skip to any part in the video, I've put down below some of the more common phrases or words or whatever that you can skip to for its explanation. Hopefully it can help you out. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? I figure the very first thing we should talk about is the phrase in county. This word is pretty important, I should say this phrase is pretty important. It basically means anything in the server. That's what we say, like, in the server. It's my first time here in county. You're basically saying this is my first time here in the server, and that's a really good way to, like, get started with conversation, and just, like, people tend to be really welcoming. Hopefully you find a server that's really welcoming, and they're welcoming to newer players, and hopefully you don't run into anyone that's terrible. That'd be awful. I'm sorry if you have that as your experience, but hopefully you find a server that's not like that. But basically you can always say, you're new in county, or you can always ask, is so and so in county, and people will be like, oh, I don't know, I saw them maybe like 5 minutes ago, so you can use that phrase quite a lot, and it's very useful. So I figure, you know what, I think this is one of the most important ones to learn first. The next phrase that is probably going to be really important is flexing your blank muscle. Basically, whenever someone says this, they're basically saying, press this button. We usually say, flex your, E muscle to get on a horse. And, then that's telling you that you need to just press your E key to get on your horse, for example. So, you can usually ask something along the lines of, I'm having a real hard time accessing my saddlebags. What muscle do I flex to open my saddlebags? You see, it's a subtle way of asking for help, without breaking character. And typically people are happy to explain the process to you, and usually they will explain it in that same terminology where they'll say, typically, oh, flex your right mouse muscle, and press this, or press this muscle in your forearm, E forearm or whatever. Like, you can get kind of creative with it, but it doesn't have to be that fancy. But typically speaking, you can just kind of use that lingo, and it's really helpful to explain how to press certain buttons, what to buttons to use, because it can be overwhelming in some servers, because there's a lot of servers have different things that they utilize. So don't be afraid to ask questions. These are great ways to ask these questions as well. Sometimes you might ask, you know, you might be asked to do something. You know, maybe you have to type a command or something like that. Usually one of the things that people will say is, oh, think /RC if you need to reset your character, for example. I think a lot of servers use that as like their base restart character command. So that one's pretty useful. So if someone tells you to think /RC, what they're telling you is basically to press whatever key it is for the text box. In our server, Lost Plains, it's the T key for text box. You know, text, T, you know, T. Anyway, you press the T and then you just type in the command that someone tells you to think. So usually they'll say like, oh, just think /RC, and then you press T to think, and then you type whatever they tell you to think. So, you know, /RC. There you go. So you can always ask people, you know, what do I think for that? Or, you know, it's usually, you know, just, you know, what should I think to do that? You know, you can always ask like that. Typically speaking, if you want to talk about the text box, we usually call it a skybox as well. That's usually in character what we call the skybox, so it doesn't break character. You know, like, oh, I saw something in my skybox that was distracting me. You know, maybe an ad had come up or something. The skybox is also where you think, you know, type. So that's important to keep in mind. The skybox. There you go. But also talking about boxes, let's talk about Voicebox. That's basically what we say when you're talking about your voice, your sound. So basically, you know, if your voice box is giving you troubles, you know, someone will say, hey, there's something you sound a little like you got a, you know, like a frog in your throat, or you got a scratchy throat, you know, something's wrong with your voice box. You know, it's usually we're saying, you know, something's wrong with your microphone, or you sound like something's going on with your sound. Typically you could just pull someone to the side and just ask for help. Just, you know, try and stay in character as well as much as possible when you're asking, you know, hey, can you hear me? Is my voice still a little scratchy? Let me just clear my throat, you know, over here, and you just go and mess with your settings or whatever, and hopefully you get it fixed. But then you can ask, you know, how's my voice box sounding, you know, and, you know, hopefully your friend can help you, and y'all can also try and stay in character as much as possible, trying to communicate with that stuff. If you really need help, also you can go to the Discord of the server that you're in. For example, in Lost Plains, we typically are very helpful for people that have audio issues. We tend to try and help y'all out as much as possible. We have a Discord section for that sort of thing, for RedM help, so feel free to use that if you need it. I'm sure other servers have it as well. I'm pretty sure it's pretty common. So if you're on a server and you're noticing people are saying, hey, there's something, I can't hear you, there's something wrong with your voice box, and you just can't figure it out, try and see if the server Discord can help you out as well. Speaking of which, Discord, if you need to say Discord in server, a lot of servers usually call it the Discordian times. I know some people have voiced this disagreement as to what we should call it, but typically speaking, if you say Discordian times in conversation, people know that you're referring to your Discord. So if you, for example, notice there's an announcement, you know, from the government, is basically management. That's what we call it here in Lost Plains, is the government is management or staff. So, you know, if you notice there's an announcement from the government, you can usually say, oh, I just was reading my Discordian Times. Did you read the Discordian Times lately? And you can say that to someone and they can look at the announcement from the government, which is, you know, staff or whatever. And that's something like to be like, oh, that's very interesting. And a lot of times it can be, you know, stuff that you can refer to in character. Sometimes not so much, but keep in mind, no metagaming. No meta. If you don't know what metagaming is, check out my last video. I think it would help you out a lot. Those are pretty much basic terms, so I put them all in a video of their own. Those are basic roleplay terms. But if you need someone to check out the Discord, you cannot just call it Discord in roleplay. We just call it Discordian Times, and most people will know what you're talking about. We talked about muscles, which are, you know, your keybinds. Flex your E muscle. Flex your left click muscle. Those sorts of things. You know, muscles are your keybinds. Pockets are your inventory. So a lot of times you can say, you know, I have 5 pockets left. You know, I have 5 pockets left. You know, that's how many inventory spaces you might have. Some people say that. Pockets typically just means your inventory, what you have. You know, I'm gonna look in my pockets real quick. That just means, you know, you're looking in your inventory, you're searching into, you know, your bags. You know, you can even say, you know, if you're opening your saddlebags, you know, hey, I'm just looking in my bags real quick. You know, that, and you're looking into your saddlebags, whatever, right? So, pockets, saddlebags. So we talked about, you know, if you have a scratchy throat or a frog in your throat, you know, alternatively, you can also say, you know, I've got cotton in my ears if you can't hear things. You know, like, oh, I'm having a hard time hearing, you know, I got dirt in my ears. You know, you can get a little creative about it. You know, I usually say, yeah, I got cotton in my ears. Sometimes I forget to unmute my my GoXLR chat audio, and so sometimes I'll be around town and realize, oh, I haven't unmuted that, so I'll say, you know, in character, hold on, I gotta pull the cotton out of my ears, and I unmute at that point, or undeafen, I should say. So that's a phrase you can use if you've got like audio issues. If you have visual issues, if something is looking a little strange, you can say, oh, in my eyes, I see something strange, you know. That's very common to say, you know, if you see maybe a glitch or something that's a little strange, you could say that, like, oh, in my eyes, I'm seeing something very peculiar, a little strange. And so other people will be like, oh, I'm seeing that too, you know, and that could be a conversation. But typically speaking, you want to just say, you know, just try to stay in character, try to make it as realistic as possible, try to explain anything off as much as possible. You know, oh, it must have been a mirage. Oh, I must have been drinking a little too much. Maybe I drank some bad water, you know, just kind of play it off as much as possible. So, you know, you try and keep everything as realistic as possible. You can also say, you know, get your eyes checked, or check, you know, if they're talking about, you know, hey, is that horse look a little weird to you? Maybe it's like doing some weird stuff on your side of things. You're like, is that horse looking weird to you? Because in my eyes, it's looking a little weird. And then the other person can basically be like, no, I think you need to get your eyes checked. As in, I don't see anything weird about it. It's just you, basically. So sometimes that might mean you might have to relog, and hopefully that fixes the issue. Sometimes if you see through your eyes, which is what another phrase that we say, you know, look through your eyes or see through your eyes. What that means is cycle through your camera enough times that it's the first person view. If you know, you know. Usually it's the I think the V key. Is it V? Is it V for vampire? I think so. Anyway, so you press that a couple of times, you should get into first person. On most servers, they have that, if not all of them, I believe. Um, if you have any visual issues, sometimes looking through your eyes, as we call it, can help fix things. But that's another thing you can say is like, give me a minute, I'm gonna look through my eyes. You can say that even to say, oh, let me look through my eyes to get a better look at your gun. If someone's trying to show off their gun to you, you can say, oh, let me look through my eyes. That just means you're cycling to like actually like be in first person looking through your eyes. That's what we say. I hope that makes sense. If you get disconnected or you crash, we usually call that a head pop or a headache. If you uh if you go to sleep, usually we call that taking a nap. If you had something bad happen, or maybe like I should say not necessarily bad, but if something was glitchy or it wasn't working well for you and you needed to relog, we usually call that as taking a nap. So we say taking a trip if you're going to be gone for a while. Basically, you can take a trip anywhere. It just has to be out of county. It can be far away. It really depends on the universe of the roleplay server as well. So just make sure that you're roleplaying it within reason. But in Lost Plains, typically you say, "Oh, I'm taking a trip," or "I'm on vacation." So at this place, blah blah blah, whatever. If you want to let people know. Typically a lot of people go to Mexico, but in a lot of terms, sometimes Mexico is referred to as a place where people spawn, or kind of the place where you go to like have like things get wild in Mexico, basically, even in RedM. So I don't know. Mexico is like a weird term if you hear it. It really depends on the server as well. Typically, people say they're taking a trip to Mexico if they're going to be gone a while, or they might take a trip somewhere else. It really depends. But typically, I think that most people do the Mexico thing. The next important term that I would like to teach you is storm, is the server storm. Basically, that's what we call a server restart. Every server in RedM, that's as far as I'm aware, calls it a storm. If you see the announcements of it coming, typically servers give you a few minutes announcements about it. Typically, some servers make it so that you can't do any crime or do anything crazy within a certain amount of time between to storm. It's just to make sure that everybody kind of has a fair advantage, and it doesn't like cause problems. So just make sure you're reading the rules of the server that you're involved in. But that's what we call the server restarts. Most servers have a restart. It's really healthy for servers to have restarts. So just be prepared to have these restarts happen. But you can't call them restarts in RedM. So we call them storms. And we say, I'm going to, take a nap before the storm. The next important term that I'm going to teach you is the train. Basically, a train is the server queue. That's, as far as I'm aware, like that's basically what it's always called. I mean, so some servers have an actual train in the server, so that's one thing. But typically speaking, people will say, oh, so-and-so is still on the train trying to get into county. And usually that means they're in queue trying to get into the server, but can't. So they're just waiting in queue until other people log out so that they can get in. Some servers have that many people in them that it just takes that long to load into that server, because it's literally waiting for an open spot to load you in. It's kind of crazy. But that's usually what we refer to as the train, is the queue into these servers. Once you're in the server, it will assign you a random ID number, typically speaking, on RedM servers. And we call these train tickets, your ID cards. Some servers have them. They might have them in a different way. They might have them as your Steam names, or your Rockstar store names, if that's how you have it. I don't know, it's all different and weird. But basically it will, every server is a little different, but if they have an ID system, typically we call that your train ticket, your lucky number. In our server, we're currently using IDs in our server. To get your ID or to share your ID with someone, you would just type in /ID into the text box or the Skybox, using our terminology. And you would just type that in and it would flash your train ticket, which is your ID. Some servers, like I said, they might use what they call your nickname or your middle name, which is basically referring to your Steam name. So for example, my Steam name would be Vampire Toy. That would be my middle name, which in a roleplay situation, if you have a serious roleplay server, suddenly just having someone being like, yeah, my middle name is Vampire Toy. I don't know. I just don't see that being very serious. But I digress. Some servers do have that, so just be aware of the server that you're on and what it is they call it. So what happens if you go AFK? We call that going in your head or thinking really hard. Some people, if your character's religious, they might be praying. Some people, might be, eating. I mean, it really depends. You can really just, typically though, if you're gonna, go AFK or, need to go off to do something, you would typically let people around you know, hey, I'm gonna be in my head for a little bit. And that's to tell people, hey, I'm going AFK for a couple minutes, just, keep an eye on your character basically. And typically speaking, if you're AFK, people tend to be understanding and they won't engage with you if it's pretty clear like you're AFK. They should leave you alone. Hopefully the server that you're on has rules about engagement, and if that person just doesn't engage with, the person, then they can't do something, right? But it can't be abused, and don't be one of those people that's just like, oh, I'm in my head, and then just pretend that you're in your head when people come up to you to try and rob you. Because if they see you moving a couple minutes later, they'll come swarming. And you can't pretend that. You can't. Oh, you cannot. You're gonna get in trouble. So don't be that. Don't do that. Like, don't take advantage of this. Obviously, if you have to go use the restroom or get yourself some water, take a break, stretch your legs, get some fresh air, you should absolutely feel free to use this system, the in your head or you're thinking real hard system. But people shouldn't abuse it, and some servers crack down on it. So just be careful that you're not abusing this system, and just be careful where you put your character as well. You don't want to put your character someplace and then someone just decides to give you a hard time and you were not there to witness it. So just be careful where you put your character, and try not to abuse this mechanic or to abuse this it's not necessarily a mechanic. I guess it's like a courtesy, we would call it. But yeah, just this is something, if you gotta go AFK or you gotta go do something real quick, you can absolutely just go do that. Like, that's fine. No one should fault you for that. Again, as long as it's not being abused to escape certain scenarios, I don't foresee this being a problem at all. Also, on that same wavelength as well, we have spiritual. Now this is kind of, use this with very rarely, I would say. Use this rarely. But when you say spiritual, usually that's referring to real life. So that's why I say use this sparingly. But for example, if you wanted to explain to someone why maybe you weren't around as often as much as you'd like to be. You could say, or like maybe you were going to get on earlier, but something came up. You could say, you know, oh, spiritually, I had to mow the lawn. You know, spiritually, you know, I wanted to go get food. You know, that's just basically saying, you know, you, the role player, had this happen, that you were doing this. So I hope that explains it. It makes it just so you're explaining the OOC stuff in a way where it kind of makes sense in character. But again, use this sparingly. But, you know, I've used this before where I say, you know, spiritually, I am enjoying, you know, a popsicle, right? Like, it wouldn't be unknown at that time to have a popsicle. So it's like, you know, spiritually speaking. And that's, you can explain that to people, right? Like, it's just a way to communicate it. And in the same boat, we have in my past life or in a past life. You can usually use this phrase to talk about maybe a previous character on another server or just a previous character in general. I say to use this very sparingly as well, just like the spiritual or in your head thing. But the in my past life, I really recommend using this sparingly because it can really become a bit meta-y. But you could say something like, "Oh, I feel like I've been here in a past life." Maybe if you were at a property that you had once owned or something, for example, or you could say, "Oh, this field of flowers makes me sad. I feel like I had a bad experience in a past life here." You know what I mean? But again, I would say use this sparingly because it's really drawing from other roleplay and bringing it into new roleplay, which could be, you know, making new memories and new impressions instead of dwelling on older roleplay scenarios and impressions. You can be making new memories. So I do often, you know, tell people just, you know, be careful overusing these ones. They can be nice to kind of reminisce with someone if you are with someone role playing with them and you go to an area that maybe both of you had a good time with. You can be like, oh, I don't know why, but I have a really good feeling about this area. I must have had a good past life here or something. Or you know what I mean? Just kind of play it off in that sort of way. But again, as long as it's not being overused or overdone, I don't see any problem with it. Just don't make it all your character is. And last, but certainly not least, locals. Locals, it's kind of funny because I think one of the things that newer players really struggle with is determining who's an actual player versus who is a local. My biggest rule of thumb to people for determining whether or not someone is a local or an actual player or a citizen, as they can also often be called, by the way, citizen. Typically, they walk differently. So, players walk a little more like they have a purpose, like they're going someplace, they're really just going. Versus locals kind of like meander. You know that word meander? That's basically what a local is doing. They are meandering. There's no better word for it, really, truly. So they meander. And typically speaking, a lot of players will have guns on their backs, right? So most locals will not have guns on their backs. Most locals. I don't think almost any of them will have, like almost none of them will have two. I don't even think one, but maybe there might be some with one. So that is possible, but for the most part, players will have two guns on them typically if they can. They'll have holsters with, you know, pistol, a knife in the holsters. Their horses will typically be a lot more ornate. uh, maybe with very recognizable designs. Yeah. Those are the best ways, I think, to tell the difference. Also, if they talk to you, that should be maybe one of the best cues to tell whether it's a person or a local, whether it's a citizen or a local, is if they talk to you. Um, Locals will talk to you. They'll say, you know, howdy, miss, or, you know, you're looking like a fine mess, you know, if you're covered in blood. They'll say stuff to you, but it sounds very much like part of the game. Versus when you're talking with other people, you'll hear them and it's like you can tell the difference. I don't know. Um and also, typically speaking, people who are talking to you will try to interact with you in some way. They might raise their hands, they might point at you, you know, so they might indicate, you know, that they are an actual person, not just the NPC, aka the locals. So that's a good way to tell as well. With that, we've come to the end of the video, and I just want to say thank you very much for watching. I just want to quickly add one last final thing to help you get along on your RedM journey, and that is most times you're just gonna have to wing it. A lot of things that I've just explained are pretty common terminologies that most servers utilize that you will probably need or run into. But for the most part, roleplay is just kind of doing things and kind of figuring it out as you go along. As long as you're trying to follow the rules and you stick to the rules as much as possible, you should be fine. Just make sure to read and understand your server's rules before you get into it. But a lot of times you'll just have to get creative with some of the things that you're doing. For example, if you have to explain computer problems to people in character, you can basically say something along the lines of, you know, I've been having, you know, issues with my brain, and spiritually, it's just been very difficult for me to, you know, be in county. And, you know, you can kind of get creative with the way you say things or things that have happened to you. So sometimes you'll just have to be a little creative in character about what is going on, and you'll have to make up words as you need, you know, make up phrases as you need. Just try to stay in character as much as possible and try to be creative when you're explaining things to other people around you so that you don't break character for others. Sometimes it's a great challenge to figure out how to explain something that's kind of maybe even an OOC thing, but how to explain that in such a way in character that makes sense for what is happening and for what's going on between everybody involved. So there's a lot of creative leeway. Just make sure not to abuse it and follow all the rules of the server that you are on. Again, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I truly do appreciate it. Give us a like, give it a comment, let me know what you thought of the terms. Maybe did I miss some terminologies or some phrases that maybe you're just like, hello, why didn't we talk about this? Put it down in the comments, let me know, and subscribe for more of these videos. I post Dead by Daylight videos as well as RedM tutorials, and we'll be posting some RedM highlights coming soon as well. So hopefully we'll see you around for all of that. And as always, in case you haven't heard it yet today, you are awesome and capable of more than you even realize. Much love, and I'll see you next time. Yeehaw!